In other words, fidelity online. It really doesn't deal that much with online stuff, but it does deal a lot with domestic violence. So that's primarily what we're going to talk about today is domestic violence and the different types of domestic violence that we might potentially be dealing with. This is in Arndtfield and Swart again, chapter 5. Social media is a significant trigger for any person prone to paranoia, jealousy, and the need to control others. It is, as we have discussed earlier, a highly interactive platform where technical and psychological barriers to communication are significantly lowered and notoriously difficult to dictate, as are the potential outcomes of these communications. A person predisposed to distrust and jealousy in offline interactions and relationships will inevitably find it especially hard to navigate the relational fluidity of social media forums. They may act out both online and offline in order to defend what he or she perceives to be entitled to, own, or control. A spouse or other intimate partner already demonstrating tendencies of domestic abuse will be more likely to view social media exchanges as a source of provocation as well as an aid in their endeavors to manipulate and control a partner. According to estimates published by the World Health Organization, WHO, almost 1/3 of women who are or have been in an intimate relationship reported that they have experienced some form of physical and or sexual violence by their intimate partner in their lifetime. That's 1 out of every 3. Although men are also often the victims of domestic abuse, research actually suggests at near equal rates, but vastly underreported and comparatively unrecognized, females are more than twice as likely to be injured as their male counterparts, 3 times more likely to fear for their lives, twice as likely to be stalked, and twice as likely to experience more than 10 separate incidents of violence. Domestic violence is the second leading circumstance of violent death among women in the United States today, following suicide. In 2015 alone, 1,005 women and 265 men were killed by a spouse or a romantic partner. There are 3 initial stages that tend to recur and intensify with each repetition to form an increasingly destructive spiral that often culminates in serious physical violence or even lethal action. The first is tension building, which is accompanied with rising sense of danger for the person that is the victim. Number 2 is the acute battering or the abusive incident. And third is loving contrition, where they promise they'll never do it again. After a period of relative peace and calm, tensions between the abuser and the victim start to rise again, especially if there are some added stressors present, such as financial difficulties, work trouble, wider family discord, or anger and control issues on either one of their sides. The perpetrator either has poor impulse control or emotion dysregulation, or a deep-seated need to dominate and subjugate his or her partner, or both. Sorry, I needed a drink. Nothing the victim does is considered good enough. They are constantly reminded that they fall short of the partner's expectations through snide and sarcastic comments, being given the cold shoulder, being discredited and embarrassed in front of others, including friends, family, and children, and constantly opposed and corrected. The victim loses the little confidence and hope that they have collected in the calm phase and starts to pull back. They may also act defensively, despairingly, or erratically, which often angers the abuser further. As the abuser increasingly attacks and discredits their partner and the partner retreats, the tensions rise significantly until a release is inevitable, which occurs in the form of an acute incident. In the context of the internet and social media, the tension building phase is characterized by a tightening of control over the victim's online presence and communication with outsiders, or derogatory remarks are made of content posted. An acute abusive incident can vary from a heated argument, threat, and devaluing statements that are deeply traumatic to forcible rape and physical assault. The event is the culmination of the tension building phase, which can take place over several days or a few weeks and is typically shorter than the loving contrition or the calm phase. Reactive aggression is an act performed in the response to a perceived provocation or in retaliation of an imagined wrongdoing. Such hostile reaction is characterized by reflexive and impulsive behavior to the perception of an interpersonal threat when emotion regulation fails. An important aspect to note is that reactive aggression can be directed at a surrogate. The physical target of the aggression at the moment is not necessarily the principal object that triggered the outburst, but serves as a psychological substitute for the object of their rage, In this context, two psychological phenomena are relevant, namely displacement and projection. So it may not be her or him that they are angry with. It may be their boss, or it may be, their mother, or it may be, um, you know, their father. It really doesn't matter. They're striking out at the only person that they can harm. Displacement is an unconscious mechanism whereby the mind substitutes an object causing distress or anxiety for a new target because it is more available, accessible, or poses less consequences. So if this individual has a great deal of tension and they need to strike out, it's much easier to strike out at their child than it is to strike out at their spouse who would probably fight back. The child cannot fight back. A man angered by someone with power over him or who is physically stronger may take out his frustration on someone weaker and more vulnerable, i.e. his children or his spouse. Some serial killers who have been traumatized by their mother during childhood select their victims based on characteristics that remind them of her and punish them as a surrogate for the source of their hatred. This is Kemper. I can't think of his first name right off the top of my head. It was just there a second. Anyway, his name is Kemper. He's 6'9", weighs 250 pounds. His mother divorced his father when he was 9 years old. Then she started having lots and lots of boyfriends. The boyfriends abused him, and the mother abused him, and the mother allowed the boyfriends to abuse him. So he grew up very angry. When he was 15 years old, he went to live with his grandparents. He killed both of his grandparents, shot them with a .22 in the head, and was able to kill them. Eventually, he was released from juvie, and he started a life of crime. He found his mother and beheaded her. And then he stalked. He was actually from Montana, and he went down to the California area, to the Los Angeles area, and started driving up and down. And when he found a young lady that reminded him of his mother, he would induce her to come along with him, and then he would murder them. He murdered 10 women that way. Anyway, he beheaded his mother. I won't tell you what he did with the head, but he was fairly notorious. Psychological projection is when a person unconsciously defends their weaknesses or vulnerabilities by denying their existence and blaming or attributing them to others. A spouse who may be cheating or simply indulging in an emotional affair on social media often blames their partner for the same behavior. This very thing happened to me when I was going to college. My wife kept accusing me of having an affair, of being in love with somebody else. It was really kind of weird. I thought she was watching something strange on television, and she was, becoming emotionally involved with television. But what actually was happening was that she was having an affair. And despite the fact that I was going to an all-male college, And there were hardly any women around. She accused me of having an affair. And the reality was, not only did she desire to have an affair, but she was actually having one with my best friend. I was a quarter miler and he was a miler, so I guess, and he was taller and better, a lot better looking than I was. But that's, neither here nor there. The projection part was where she accused me of having an affair, when of course it was her that was having one. Both displacement and projection are signs of an external locus of control and are often drivers of reactive behavior, as they tend to cause internal discord that requires relief through an outward response such as anger, distrust, anxiety, and depression. When distressed, the person seeks to alleviate the pressure and discomfort caused by the attack on their ego by lashing out against others. Rather than an aggressive response to a perceived threat, proactive aggression is a deliberate and planned behavior in anticipation of a reward. Cold and calculated action is executed as a means to an end, which is to achieve some sort of material, physical, psychological, or emotional gain. Someone with psychopathic tendencies may get satisfaction purely from the hurt and torment that they inflict on others. They deliberately seek to satisfy their own needs, notwithstanding the cost to those around them. And the reason I have a picture of a man who is yawning with a really big yawn, and he always makes me need to yawn since I acknowledge that. The reason I show you this picture is because people with psychopathic tendencies, most people, when they see somebody yawn, they either feel like or they will yawn along with the guy, with the other individual. But a psychopath won't. And this is one of the ways that you can determine if somebody's a psychopath, by whether they yawn when somebody else does. Why we do that, nobody's exactly sure. Why we yawn when somebody else yawns, but a psychopath can't do it, because a psychopath is everything is internal as far as he's concerned. He doesn't really care what's going on out in the outer world, so he doesn't react to other people like normal people do. While a normal person values a reasonable and justified number of positive cues and is able to ignore destructive and censorious criticism, a narcissist is unable to make these distinctions. They base all decisions and actions purely on their need. They align themselves with people able and willing to fulfill their narcissistic demands through consistent supply, and feel completely shunned when others fail to similarly convey their recognition and admiration. As a result, they act contemptuous or retaliate against their perceived betrayer. Both psychopathic and narcissistic personality traits are also associated with unprovoked aggressive behavior. In the context of the internet and social media, an acute abusive incident can be viewed as a deliberate act committed online that causes the victim and their relationship irreparable harm and trauma. This would entail activities such as revenge porn, outing deeply sensitive information about the victim, threatening the victim or acquaintances with violence or death, or severing their internet usage, and a codependent social network in the process. Active abusive incident is typically of a short duration, from minutes to hours, and leaves the victim severely emotionally exhausted, feeling hopeless and sometimes injured, while the offender, having found temporary relief, cools off and expresses guilt and regret, denies or minimizes the event, or diverts all blame to the victim, depending on the personality and underlying motivation of the abuser. For abusers with psychopathic and narcissistic traits, loving contrition is an indispensable part of their pattern of proactive aggressive behavior. Their primary aim is to maintain their dominance and control, by which they get psychological gratification. They use their charm to make their promises believable, as they realize the value that their partner holds for them as their admirer or punching bag, literally and emotionally. Abusers with narcissistic and psychopathic characteristics are intent on achieving a desired end result, and are not likely to see themselves as part of a problem in their relationship, which they believe their partner either imagined or exaggerated. They act self-assured and deny having shortcomings. They feel entitled and view their partner as a lesser part of the relationship or an extension of their impressiveness. For them, the loving contrition phase is an opportunity to further entrap their victim by reestablishing their dependency and easing down in intensity to give them time to recharge and pursue their objects. This would be a case of someone having a what do they call them? Eye candy is one of the words. Trophy wife, having trophy wives. This that they want people to admire them for this other person's beauty because they have that individual. That's the whole idea behind the whole trophy wife and eye candy concept. During repeated cycles of abuse, the victim learns that they cannot escape the inevitable. Often they feel that they have tried everything but have been cut off or failed at every turn. Many come to blame themselves, feeling that they play a part in their partner's bad behavior. They feel guilty and too ashamed to share their experiences with friends and family or seek professional support. But in addition, they're afraid of a retaliatory backlash if they reveal anything negative and hope that things will somehow change for the better. This is somebody wanting to change their significant other. They want to change their spouse. That doesn't really happen all that often. Changing somebody for the better. Similar to what is seen with many victims of kidnapping, in a sense more so because they are emotionally and romantically entangled with their abuser, these victims learn to cope and minimize their risk by assuaging and pleasing them, a phenomenon historically best known as Stockholm Syndrome. They become passive and dependent, hoping that they could lengthen the calm period and postpone the next abusive incident indefinitely. Without viable alternatives, their only coping mechanism is to endure the abuse, rather than finding ways to avoid the incidents, even if they can be escaped. In a way, victims trade their efforts and skills to escape for those who have a chance at lowering their level and intensity of their suffering. For them, trying to escape has become more dangerous than staying and coping with the abuse. The status quo is safer and more predictable than the uncertain alternative. It is a case of better the devil you know than the devil you don't, especially as victims not only lose confidence in themselves, but other people, systems, and institutions too. Most are threatened by their partners not to try and leave, not to cross them, and not to taint their image in public. Paralyzed by these fears and uncertainties, they become apathetic and depressed, unwilling to try new behaviors. Future abuse is accepted as inescapable, a powerful perception reinforced by their partner to quell any motivation to resist or escape. People with antisocial personalities, power or status aspirations, or even insecurities and paranoid ideas need victims to sustain their needs. Anyone who is seen to be in a lesser or vulnerable position, who is naive, trusting, and impressionable, or who is simply at the right time and place to help fulfill a need, is inevitably at a risk. The female age group at highest risk for domestic violence victimization is 16 to 24, with the 25 to 35 category closely behind. But it's the 16 to 24 that are the most vulnerable. This is a picture of college girls, and of course you graduate. If you're a traditional student, you start school at 18, you graduate at 22, so they would be well within that group of the most abused, the most at highest. Are at the highest risk for domestic violence. Women are 5 times more likely to be reported victims than men, and divorced or separated couples are 3 times more likely to be involved in abuse than their married or single counterparts. Other risk factors associated with higher rates of domestic abuse are a lower annual household income, renting rather than owning a home, and the location, ethnicity, and English language abilities of the victim. Women in rural and remote areas are considered more vulnerable to victimization. The same applies to those from culturally and linguistically different backgrounds, pregnant women, women with a disability, and women who are otherwise financially dependent. Drug and alcohol use are also linked to general relationship strain and a risk factor in domestic abuse. Many victims suffer from pre-existing mental health issues such as depression and borderline personality disorder and are often poorly educated or otherwise discouraged from getting an education or working, relatively isolated, emotionally dependent, and insecure and have a low self-esteem and a past history of abuse, either as a child or in a previous relationship. The statistics show that a woman that is the most likely to be raped is a woman who has been raped before. Why this is, we're not exactly sure. If we could change it, we certainly would. But the statistics are out there, and we're not exactly sure what's happening with this individual. With their partner in public, they may appear more strained than before, but they try to put on a front of loyalty and happiness. Their partner may watch them or speak for them. They are prevented from spending time with anyone alone and are questioned about or accused of perceived improprieties. The values of the cyber communities may accept abuse against certain people, such as women, children, those who are disloyal, and people who are difficult. As a result, community sanctions against domestic abuse, much like they have been for many years in offline context, may be weak or non-existent. And this is just a point of reality. If you are a member of that cyber community and it is it's one that accepts this type of behavior, violence, this type of behavior, then potentially they're not going to censure you for anything that you do. In many areas, gender inequality also remains an important underlying factor in allowing domestic abuse to continue. More specifically, traditional gender norms, for example, women should stay at home, not enter the workforce, and be submissive. Men support the family and make the decisions, serve to increase the power differential between heterosexual partners, justify punishment if the expectations are not met, and place additional stress on one partner as the sole responsible person. Research by the United States Department of Justice has found that about 1/3 of all victims of domestic abuse were only threatened in some way. Of these, 32% of being killed and 18% with a weapon, while the majority, 69%, were also physically attacked. What is of graver concern is that half the victims of intimate partner violence were injured in the process. Although the majority of these, 84%, only sustained minor injuries, a sizable percentage had suffered serious injuries such as broken bones, concussions, internal damage, and knife wounds. Common factors that indicate an increased risk of lethal violence: threats to kill the victim, talk of suicide by the abuser, fantasies of a homicide or suicide, availability of weapons, use of a weapon in prior abusive incidents, threats with weapons, serious injury in prior abusive incidents, extreme controlling, jealous, or obsessive behavior, frequent use of drugs and alcohol by the abuser, depression of the abuser, isolation of or dependency on the victim, escalation of violence and or risk-taking, acts of abuse in public, including on social media, leaving or trying to end the relationship, use of choking or strangling, forced sex of female partner, stalking, abduction, or hostage-taking behavior, history or threats of arson, familiarity with the use of violence, police contact, for example, complaints, restraining orders, questioning, A history of antisocial behavior, for example, public fighting, gang-related violence, vandalism, and job-related violence, violence in abuser's family or origin, or during childhood, cruelty to animals, violation of protective orders, a history of mental health problems. These are the common risk factors for lethal violence. Family-only abusers, this group is believed to engage in the least amount of violence inside the home, with the lowest levels of psychological and sexual abuse against their partners. They generally refrain from committing aggressive acts outside the home. They typically have low or insignificant mental health issues, and abusive incidents are infrequent and contextual. Abusive incidents are triggered by situational stress, and they experience guilt and remorse afterward. That's the family-only abusers. The shared feature of the dysphoric or borderline abusers is the presence of pervasive attachment issues that typically stem from a childhood of caregiver absence, neglect, or rejection. As a result, they have difficulty forming a secure and trusting adult attachment with a romantic partner. They can be very jealous and engage in obsessive behavior because of their dependence and fear of losing their partners. Their possible borderline personality traits cause impulsive and unstable behavior, which may result in violence when angry and frustrated. They tend to have high levels of depression, especially when feeling uncertain and stressed, which may lead to substance use and violent and suicidal behavior. They have relatively conservative attitudes toward the roles of women and can become extremely jealous and reactively aggressive when their expectations are not met or when they perceive that their relationship is threatened. In some cases, this may result in lethal violence, sometimes with psychotic aspects, and is often followed by suicide. In other words, these are the murder-suicide pacts, or not the pact, but this is the murder-suicide situation. They murder the person that they are angry with, and then they commit suicide. Dysphoric or borderline abusers are somewhat amenable to accepting outside help and to receive professional treatment. Evidence-based therapy approaches directed at their mental health symptoms, for example, depression, emotion dysregulation, insecure attachments, substance abuse, and distorted self-image, have proven effective to reduce their distress. So these people are treatable. But one group that isn't are these guys. Generally, violent and antisocial abusers commit the most serious and frequent incidents of domestic abuse. They typically exhibit narcissistic, antisocial, or psychotic tendencies that include impulsive and high-risk behavior and a lack of empathy and remorse, a pathological need for power and control, and admiration and self-centered orientation, usually accompanied by rigid expectations of their partner's roles and responsibilities. The personality style of violent and antisocial abusers is likely rooted in a history of violence and delinquency from their parental homes, and they associate with deviant peers and criminal activities outside the home. They have hostile attitudes toward women and other vulnerable groups and justify violence as acceptable to achieve their own goals. Relationship violence is a part of their antisocial lifestyle and general aggressive tendencies. Of the three batterer types, their domestic abuse leads to the highest level of victim injuries, which is most often preceded and exacerbated by substance use and problems with the law. Generally, violent and antisocial abusers have the poorest prognosis for change, as they do not view themselves as responsible in any way for domestic and other problems, and are therefore not likely to seek outside support or help. If accosted or mandated to receive treatment, they are resistant and do not cooperate. This narcissistic antisocial type of abuser will most naturally deny the abuse and, if necessary, rationalize their actions and justify their beliefs. Psychopathic traits are not only found among violent criminals, but also in the many individuals in the highest ranks of their professions, institutions, and social networks. works. These are the most ruthless people in the world, and that's how they get on top. If they have violent tendencies, then they become criminals. If they don't have violent tendencies, they become CEOs of companies. And you think I'm kidding, but it takes ruthlessness to be able to advance a program. It's just the way it works. It is often argued that those with psychopathic traits are perfectly suited to be high achievers, especially if accompanied by good instinctive judgment, as they are risk takers and intent on pursuing their self-interest without much regard for the preferences and needs of others around them. And these are the guys that are always successful, but everybody says, I hated to work for him because he didn't care what happened to me. They're often seen to lack emotional insight, and empathy. Emotional insight and empathy. It needs to be reemphasized that many normal, well-functioning, and high-achieving individuals have narcissistic and or psychopathic traits in non-pathological measures. Psychopathic features per se are not bad or harmful, but they can be abrasive to others, especially those who seek empathy, consideration, and recognition themselves. Both the narcissistic and psychopathic personalities can be extremely self-focused, which may have been born from a need for self-protection during adverse times. It is also possible that abusers feel inherently powerless and unable to provide or fear being in that position. Psychopaths often have a natural tendency to shun others and dismiss their emotions while shutting down their own. They also often carry out plans with an objective to achieve their own goals in lieu of others' interests. It may be tangible goals such as money or status, or simply to gain personal satisfaction or self-protection. A comparison between the categories highlights their different orientations. The family-only and dysphoric borderline groups, mainly engaging in reactive aggression, focused on their partner, while for the antisocial group, abusive actions against their partner are part of a larger pattern of proactive aggression that extends outside the home to further their own interests and need for control. Other than the first and second types, they also justify violence and other forms of abuse and use it as a tool to establish dominance. Again, distinctive from the others, they do not feel guilt or remorse, although they may fake it as part of their greater plan. And this is one of the things you can notice in CEOs. They rarely have been married only once. Usually they've been married twice or three times. Their old spouse, as soon as they got old, the guy started messing around on her and was looking for another trophy wife, was looking for a trophy wife or looking for a better trophy wife. We won't use Donald Trump as an example. He's hard to call Melania anything but a trophy wife, but at one point he married a model named Ivanka. I can't remember her last name, but that's Ivana. I'm sorry, her name was Ivana, and that's why Ivanka has her name. And she is the mother of his three oldest children. And then he married a woman that was she was also a model. Her name was Marla Maples, and it was quite a scandal when he married her. And then eventually he got tired of her and married Melania, but he was dating Melania for an extended length of time. Anyway, I hate to talk about Donald Trump. I know maybe you're going to vote for him for president in 2024, but these are things that we know about Donald Trump. One popular misconception is that online harassment and abuse is perpetrated by strangers and perverts, when in fact it is often perpetrated by someone close to the victim as part of a combination of online intimidation and offline physical and emotional abuse. The internet and related technologies allows abusers to surveil their victims, to know what they do and whom they talk to. Information has always been a key part of control, and social media and tracking apps provide effective ways to spy on partners. Mobile applications such as Connect, Tricker Tracker, Find My Friends, and Phone Tracker make it possible to track their movements either by GPS tracking or collecting location information from posts on multiple social media sites, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google Contacts, and LinkedIn. Then there are apps to monitor text messages, mobile calls, and operate CCTV cameras. Though meant to be used with someone else's approval, all these can be installed and secretly monitored following basic access to a partner's phone. Any type of surveillance implies a high level of distrust and paranoia and the need to cross boundaries of social norms to stay informed. In the context of jealousy, even benign information can be misinterpreted to become a threat to the watcher's self-confidence and precarious position as the dominant who expects full control over all aspects of the partner's life. The very anonymous and elusive nature of social media and online communications also makes for an ideal conduit through which to execute revenge. Using their own or a fake identity, abusers employ a variety of strategies to reassert control, often by openly denigrating the victim, painting him or her in a bad light, spreading rumors and lies, outing the victim in some way, and manipulating or threatening friends and family. Social media amplifies ill intentions and attitudes, providing an outlet for more extreme behaviors that are more impersonal and temporarily separated. As is evident in this and other chapters, these actions include an antisocial orientation, dysfunctional self-love, exclusion or avoidance of opposing ideas and personal differences, reactive and aggressive tendencies, risk of self-harm, and maladaptive presentations, which include online forms of voyeurism and exhibitionism. And the reason I have this picture is because this is a Korean lady, and she is showing off all of her food. She's a food exhibitionist, as weird as that is. In foreign countries, people rarely cook this much food unless they're having a party. But here she is. She's cooked up all this food. She has all these stuffed animals in the back. Look at these big bottles of Coke and Pepsi. That's a little weird. Anyway, there you go. She's an exhibitionist. Online spheres have become popular places to market oneself and flaunt vanity and individual assets, often in the name of personal branding, including beauty, wealth, and other achievements. Such an approach can be partly paraphilic, in nature to be designed to satisfy the need for a constant narcissistic supply. Users have an uncontrolled urge to check their social media profiles constantly, to verify and substantiate their place among their fans in real time. This process quickly develops into a trap where they not only set themselves up for the inevitable crushing reality that online fame is elusive and elusive, but that it has all the qualities of an addiction too. And the reality is there's a lot of celebrities who have who've turned off all their social media because of these very things. They've tried to stay away from it. They realize this is narcissistic what I'm doing, and I don't want to be this person. So a lot of celebrities, even Ye. I don't know if Kanye West changed his name from Kanye to Ye. He was off Twitter for 3 years, and then all of a sudden he divorced Kim Kardashian, or she divorced him, and all of a sudden he went back onto Twitter to attack her, which was kind of interesting. Rather than valuing meaningful content, they tend to engage in ever more outrageous online and offline to document it for online consumption behaviors. Their parties become wilder, their comments harsher, and their remaining morals and values are replaced by chasing attention. They become larger than life until they are swallowed by the same sensation that they have so desperately tried to create. There's always others who are wilder, richer, more beautiful, and connected than they are. The bystander effect is a tendency to do nothing when observing a wrong because of the assumption that someone else will intervene is epitomized in social media environments. It's known as the bystander effect. The problem is that most observers may lack the motivation and impetus to exert time and effort when they are unsure of the outcome. Feeling safe and anonymous behind their computer screens, they're often careful not to bridge the gap into the real world where they can be counterattacked, criticized, slandered, or worse. Social media is increasingly becoming a minefield where the ever-changing standards of political correctness are hawkishly watched and punished when deemed to have been transgressed. An analysis of 46 Facebook murder cases revealed that, and Facebook murder cases are cases where, because of social media, because of the interaction on social media, somebody got angry and somebody ended up dead. This is a case in Tennessee where this individual, this is the daughter and this is the mother, where these two individuals felt like a couple was making fun of the daughter. So they created this whole scenario where the daughter catfished this group of people as if she were a male CIA agent, and she was trying to induce people to do the right thing, what she called doing the right thing. And eventually she got her father to murder the two people that she thought were making fun of her. And that's one of the Facebook murder cases. An analysis of 46 Facebook murder cases revealed that family-based relationships between the perpetrator and the victim were the most common, at nearly 60% of the events. She was dating the cousin of these two people, and that's how she got involved with the whole mess. So the most common is nearly 60% of events. That's family-based relationships with a current partner at 20% and a previous partner at 19%. Now, I don't know how well you can add up, but that's 99% of all of the Facebook murder cases were either family, current partner, or a previous partner who were the ones that were involved. That means only one case. In only 6 cases had the perpetrator befriended the victim online through a fake social media profile. So we're only talking about 6 cases. It turns out to be 1% of all the cases they were looking at. New legislation introduced in December in 2015 in the United Kingdom targets perpetrators who subject spouses, partners, and family members to serious emotional and psychological abuse without committing violence. The stated purpose of the law is to identify and address verifiable patterns of controlling or coercive behavior in an intimate or family relationship that is likely to cause serious harm or distress, including to the quality of life, performance, and well-being of the individuals, institutions, and communities. Evidence of repeated coercive or controlled behavior include the following: preventing a victim from socializing, limiting access to family, friends, and finances, monitoring a person via online communication tools, for example, using a tracking app on a cell phone, threats to reveal or publish private information. And that is the end of the chapter. I'm trying to think of a good discussion question. I haven't come up with one yet. But anyway, that's pretty stark ideas of what should happen online. The stalking is this is pretty serious stuff. Anyway, okay, next week I don't know what we're going to talk about next week. We have 2 more chapters in the Arndtfield and Swart book, but we'll tackle them next week. So I'll see you guys next week. I'll come up with a discussion question.